Good morning, Facebook friends. I'm Joette Heuft. I'm the parent facilitator of the Burnaby support group here. So today we are having our session in this room full of people, about more than 30 people. And our topic is transition from the front lines, navigation and lived experiences. It's a panel presentation with a Q&A after. So I'm going to introduce the speakers today. We are very happy to have 4 speakers. We have Julian Wilson. Oh, okay. Julian is not here, but he will speak first. Like, we have Julian Wilson and Meaghen Taylor Reid. They are both Navigator from STADD. STADD is the service for transitioning adults with developmental disability under MCFD. And then we have Monique Nelson. Monique is a director of community engagement with posAbilities. So, and then we have Rachel Goddyn. Rachel is the family services consultant with Burnaby Association for Community Inclusion, what we call BACI. And after they present, Joette from SCorpig Society will introduce her group. Okay, so let's get started with Julian.
Julian and I today will go back and forth for our presentation. The piece we wanted to start with was let you know there's so much vocabulary. So clue you into the vocabulary that we'll be using today. The transitioning piece is well known to everybody, I know. The journey maps that we refer to are a reflection of the 2009 Interministerial Protocol for Transitioning Youth. This journey map, we have copies of today, starting at 14 and flowing through to 24 years of age. The piece, when we speak about transitioning, we really need that 19. But we also know that there's a whole lot of steps before and a whole lot of steps after. The piece, though, that hopefully we'll also be able to describe in more detail today is what the team before 19 and what the team after 19 can look like through our role, but also if you're not eligible to work with navigators, what that can look like for yourselves in terms of asking for support from those team members. So for our services and support, some of the key benchmarks around the transition journey here, and you'll hear us refer to later, have to do with assessments, eligibility, looking at those high school years and making the most of those touch points with your pre-19 team.
Okay, so now we just briefly want to talk a little bit around sort of the history, what brought us to today and the role of the navigator for services to adults with developmental disability. Just go over briefly who we work with and sort of how we do our work. So back in 2011, there was a deputy minister's sort of report that came out that summarized a variety of issues that had come up for youth and families across the province and service providers as well. Some of those key themes that came out were who provides what service and when and how much. We're confused by what's available. There doesn't seem to be a lot of transparency around the way decisions are made. Folks don't know each other. All of those different types of pieces that come up as areas of concern or areas where growth and improvement was possible. And so upon reflecting on those themes, the role of a navigator was sort of created or born out of that. In terms of the folks who we work with, so as STADD Navigators, we're eligible to work with young people between the ages of 16 up to their 24th birthday who are CLBC eligible. And when we're talking about CLBC eligibility, we're talking about either the personal sports initiative stream, or we're talking about the developmental disability stream. In terms of our areas of focus, so the way we approach our work is we try and do our work in a person-centered way. So we're constantly working with young people, engaging them to find out, like, what do they want to see happen? What do they want to work towards as we're trying to move them from one stage of life into another? We are very team-based as well, so a large part of our work is who's out there and available currently working with young people to support their goals, and who maybe isn't at the table who could be. And how do we bring everybody together so that we know what each other is doing, we can better assign tasks, roles, and follow-ups through that process, and that leads into the collaborative practice. So we're all working together, we're part of somebody's team to make their vision for their life happen, okay? And part of the way in which we do that is we have a platform which is called Collaborate, and youth and families, service providers, STADD Navigators can all have access to the same platform to share information as it relates only to transition planning. So there's not deep family histories or other things that don't directly have to do with the goals that are ahead of us for the transition plan that are captured there. But we'll talk a little bit more around how some of the information that we capture during a transition plan may end up there to Collaborate. So when we send out the presentation to you, there's just some quick links here on the side that'll take you to areas of our website where you can find more information around whether Navigators exist in your community. We're in, I believe, 180 communities across the province, but we're not fully province-wide. There's a list there. This piece is actually a consent form, so you can download, sign up, get consent, or give consent to want to work with a Navigator if we're in your community, and some additional information related to the transition plan. Yes, sir.
So the piece that we're able to come alongside youth in supporting is really looking at the assets that are associated with that youth, the kinds of work that we do. You'll see here, and we have this material for you, is a process called Build a Picture, looking at the 8 domains of quality of life that we know are researched to be best practice to ensure are a part of who that youth is. The work we then do from that asset-based piece is also capturing goals and dreams as they relate to the minutia of the details of transition, but then also the bigger picture pieces as well. The ways that supports are needed, so those teams before 19 will provide information about what supports look like for those youth. So those support team members are absolutely the youth themselves, family, caregiving teams. They include nurses, doctors, mental health clinicians, can sometimes, often include teachers, educational assistants, in relation to what those supports look like for that youth. The piece around figuring out services and supports that are available, our goal is that there's always choice that's available. So there can be visits that are occurring, there's research that's happening, questions are going on in order to try and figure out what that path during high school and after high school years can look like. And then we go forward with a plan that builds out goals into milestones and actions, and those actions are all supported actions as the youth is directing in their team. So the very cool piece that Collaborate, our platform, represents is we can actually action out pieces to professionals. So if we know that with that memo of understanding, there's a delegation of tasks that belongs, to a teacher, or a child and youth with special needs social worker, or a CLBC facilitator. We actually are actioning those out. And the planning approaches, of course, are extremely diverse. There's a lot of ways that planning can occur. This is simply one way that we capture and take forward pieces. Definitely, Monique and Rachel can speak to ways that planning has occurred for them, but also additional pieces that we'll use during Build a Picture and throughout planning processes include paths, so planning alternative to tomorrow with hope. My booklet was launched through the Family Support Institute, and then our tools that are Build a Picture. Individual education plans absolutely feed into these components, and we come alongside those teams.
So we've talked a little bit about this wonderful journey map, okay? And so the various steps along the way that youth and families supports may want to be mindful of as they're trying to guide someone to find their journey. Some of this stuff may appear to be more administrative, things that you definitely need to get done, and then other parts of it are a little more exploratory. Just help for that. So one of the things that's on the list is taking a look at getting a psychoeducational report done by the school in support of a youth, okay? One of the things that can be helpful for is to support an application for CLBC eligibility. That being said, also being mindful that if there's old reports that are available, previous diagnosis, it's always good to talk to the folks at CLBC to see what type of information would best support making the request for service through CLBC for eligibility. When we're talking about PWD is person with disabilities benefits and at-home supports. So with PWD, generally as we're moving into 17 and a half, if the young person is living at home with a family, or if they happen to be supported through an arrangement with the foster care system, it becomes 18 and a half. They're putting together their application to receive that support. If a young person is living at home, that benefit would begin at age 18, as would the at-home support. The at-home supports would end. The health assistance branch takes care of the supply portion of what's considered at home pre-18, and the general benefits would take care of more of the therapeutic elements. So there's, as you can imagine, there's all these moving parts with different dates and different ages, needing to go to different locations to complete these applications or gather this information in support of the transition plan. And then when we're talking about life after 19, I mean, we're talking about what you want to do, what is your primary goal, what might be something else we can do as a backup if this doesn't come through. We're applying to school and you don't get in, or there's a wait list. What else are we going to look at? What else would you like to do? How else would you want to spend your time, right? So there's always plan after plan, looking at different areas, and some of the common ones are employment, education, day programs, volunteer, friendship, independence. But a lot of the times, we'll sit down at a table and we might hear from a young person who says, I want to become a race car driver. Okay, let's talk about that. What would that look like? What's appealing to you? What do you know about how you might get the training needed to do that? And we start to walk through the process and break it down for people. Who can support you to do this piece or that piece, right? You know, we've had folks that say, you know, I want to go to school and I want to do this course. And it's around how do we find the right supports in place and what supports do you think you need to do this course, right? So there's all sorts of options, so many different examples. And one of the key messages is, of course, said before, we can work with young people starting at age 16. You look at the map and you were talking 14, 15. Start early, revise often. Part of what's really, really key, I think, when we're doing transition planning is remembering that even though young people are going through these things piece by piece, there's still a developmental curve, right? And for any young person, probably everyone in the room, we went off, we did something, we had a good or a bad experience from it, we learned something from it, we may have tried something else, or we may have kept going along a path, right? And that's the same for all of the young people and the families that we work with, right? Sometimes that final path or the main path doesn't look like the first one, and that's okay. We try and build in that time. Anything to add, Meaghen?
No, sounds great, Julian. So the team that we're looking at, we have this fun visual. Feel free to pick up a copy. We were noting that this visual, people were putting on their fridge and handwriting in the name of the contact for each of these partner pieces. So the back actually has a contact list with name and contact. So based on the main partners here, we have youth and elders in the middle, along with families circling them, and then we have representation of all of those intraministerial partners that may or may not play a role for transitioning youth, depending on who they are. But we've done our best to list them and very quickly condense the very long memo of understanding into a couple sentences. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and we'll take questions during question and answer the panel. Thank you. And now over to Monique.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you, and to our friends at home. My name's Monique, and I usually wear 2 or 3 hats at events like this. So first of all, I'm a parent, and you're going to see some photos of this handsome young man named Nick. And he's my son, and he's successfully come through the transition process in just the last couple of years. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that. And it was here in Burnaby. Mosscrop was our high school. So we have some local experience that we'd be happy to share. I also work for posAbilities, and so we're a multi-regional service provider that provides supports that you may have already experienced with your families: behavior consultation, employment services, community inclusion, which includes community connecting, and all the different types of residential services. So I'm happy to speak about those too. Can't cover it all in 15 minutes, so please feel free to ask me any questions after, or to pick up some literature about the various programs and services. I'm typically at my office, and you can reach me also on my cell anytime. So that's a little bit about me. So in my mind, our transition planning was a success, and that's why I like to share it with families in the hopes that it will be for you too. When Nick walked out of the school doors, he didn't look back, he wasn't tearful, he was just ready. And he was ready because we had a really creative plus year. So that plus year involved being in community half days and in the school half days, because he was really finished school. When he graduated and crossed the stage, he'd done most of the electives that he wanted to do. He wasn't going into an academic stream in our case, so there wasn't much left. But going back for that plus year gave him an anchor and a reason to get up and the routine. And then in the afternoons, a community support worker would take him out and start working on the goals of transition that we'd identified in our planning process. So that was a really seamless way to do it. Worked well for us. And then the next piece, I think, you might wonder why I would have a navigator in my life, being that I work in family support and in an agency with lots of resources. But the first thing I did is dropped an email to Meaghen when she returned from her parental leave and said, I'd like to have a navigator, please. And I learned so much. So, Stella's telling me I need to move. Okay. I learned so much from Meaghen. She taught me how to dream big and then bigger. And I didn't think I was challenged in that area, but having a child with some profound challenges, I actually was. I wasn't quite dreaming big enough. And that's why it was so important to have some external eyes with lots of ideas, having worked with lots of youth, to see what those opportunities might look like. So for example, Nick wasn't going to college, but how could he have a college-like experience? And we've created that through individualized funding and the support workers that are in his life now. So he continues to have learning. So finding family support to get examples of how other people have done it, and professional support, people who've seen others walk through the process, can be super, super helpful. So I'd encourage you all to join this group if you're not regular attendees, and others, because there's lots of good ones out there. Okay, so foundations of school, 3 pillars: home, school, and community, when you're in the thick of that transition process from 15 or 14 on up. So things that we have to do as families is set the expectations. When a youth comes to us in an employment service and they say they don't really want to work, we can't help them. So it's really important that if that's a value for your family and for that individual, that that expectation is set young, and it can be reinforced by things like household chores. So just like you would with your children who are developing a typical trajectory, same expectations for ours and adaptations as needed. Having paid employment before they even leave school, super helpful. Having a resume that you start to build. And then things like shopping, preparing meals. Preparing meals can be heating something up in the microwave. That's okay. That's a step to independence that might serve them very well down the road. And learning about health, relationships, and sexuality. That's an area that is sometimes missed in the school curriculum, to have it adapted to the level that the youth we love need. And so that's something I'm very proud of our agency. We've just developed a curriculum, and we have certified sexual health educators who are behavior consultants and behavior technicians as well. So they're going to be able to roll that out. It's just starting this spring. So get that education if it's not happening in school, because it's probably not happening peer-to-peer. So that's an area that a lot of youth learn, right, is from their friends. So they're not getting that informal influx. And it's really important to their social connections when they leave school as well, that they have all kinds of relationships in their lives, even intimate ones. And learning how to take direction, problem solve, give feedback, all the things you need to do in a career, start practicing those at home, that flexible thinking and problem solving. So doing with, not doing for your child, even though it's faster a lot of times. We have to let go a little bit. And maybe focusing on just a few goals, because it can be overwhelming. So there's a wonderful guide that Stella's going to talk about, which addresses all of the different skills you need for transition. It's a wee bit daunting in its size and scope, but maybe start. And it gives you a step-by-step guide to go through if you're trying to figure out which goals are the most important in different areas. So school, working with your school team to develop IEP goals that support the other goals that you're working on at home. Taking the kinds of courses that fill them up. I remember when Meaghen suggested to me that Nick enroll in leadership. It's like, but he can't speak. How can he be in leadership? Right? I think that was one of those stretches for our family. But he teaches the others. His presence teaches others, and they can find ways to involve him. So definitely take advantage of that. School clubs. I don't know if you guys know about programs in community like Vancouver Adaptive Snow Sports. Our kids learn to ski. They can go on the ski trips with the school. So really nice ways to connect. That's where home, school, and community can all partner together to help you realize goals and build some of those support networks. And this one here, you see the yellow compass card there? Learning to transit independently. That one has been huge, and I couldn't teach it. I'm simply too scared. We have to cross Boundary Road, 3 lanes of traffic. We have to cross Burrard, 3 lanes of traffic, or 6. And I couldn't do it, but Sharon could, and she did it in less than a year. And Nick now transits independently from our home to his church, and he participates in church service without us. That's just started. That took about a year though, and it took someone else, and Mom not knowing, she would take the next step before she asked me permission to teach the next step. That was critical. I really had to trust her in this. And he's so proud. Like now when he goes off on Sunday morning, he just looks back and smiles at us, right? Because he knows he's going to his people that he loves in his church. That's one of the things that I think maybe isn't so much in the manual from the Autism Society. They talk a little bit about faith communities. It's been really huge for Nick. He's been accepted there in ways that we'd never experienced before. So even though we as parents weren't attending church regularly, I noticed something in Nick that he loved it there. So we fanned that flame, and now that's the place that he's spending the most time and developing the most independence. So it's an interesting way to look at it. Dignity of risk. that's something that's probably already challenged you lots in your lives raising children, and it will continue. But it's really important to learn how to take a healthy amount of risk and put safeguards in place for them. Community. I had a slide in my old presentation that just said community is the answer, because it really is. So we know that resources are finite. We have budgets to work within. There are some things that we will get likely funding for and some things we won't. So how do we build those pieces in between? Service providers are certainly working on that. That's why we've created roles like Community Connector and different initiatives like that are taking place in community. But it takes quite a long time to develop those community partnerships and to deepen the kind of relationships. So start chipping away at that too. And when you have a choice between a rec program that's segregated or not, it's not that segregated programs aren't really good for building networks. They are, but you might also want to pair that with a community base just to continue to expand where those relationships happen, inside and out of school. Yeah, and considering your values and teaching those to your young people and knowing where they may be different. I've sent Nick out on protest marches because he likes them, you know? It's part of being a full citizen. Of other people young age who love the environment or out at a protest, why wouldn't he be there? So he's there and he's painting signs with them and he's marching and he's feeling good because Nick loves whales. I know this about Nick. I know he loves whales and the ocean and nature. So when there's an opportunity to go and speak up for those values, he goes, right? So I'm at work and he's out protesting. It's cool. So I guess my note is, it's really fun to go through transition if you frame it in that way. I wasn't, I would say, as balanced and healthy at the beginning as I am now. I had a lot of fear around the transition process and life after high school. So things that might be helpful, I went down to part-time work to 80% and took 1 day a week because there were a lot of meetings. And I didn't feel I could fit them all into evenings and lunch breaks and things. So I don't know if that's an option for everyone. I have a very flexible employer, but I really needed that for about a year just to get through the majority of the planning piece and still have some time for myself outside of it. And I didn't know how much fun it would be to be released from the school schedule. Like, that's just the best. You can start traveling in off-peak season times. You can do fun things with your family member. It makes it easier for staff retention in some ways because there are fewer breaks and you can plan them together. So I found that works really well. And connections, I just wanted to mention the Family Support Institute. It's going to come up lots, but they do have the My Booklet site hosted on theirs. They have a site to help you find support workers. They have a site all about community assets. Here, this is relatively new. So there's lots of good material there, including the transition timeline, which you can look at the age of your youth and print off a checklist that helps you prioritize what's important to do at each year and each stage and what to keep your eye on for the future. So I highly recommend those resources to everybody. And this is a little bit about my agency possibilities. Good and full lives for everyone. So I think, I'm not sure how I'm doing time-wise. I'm about 12 minutes in. Do people know about possibilities a little bit? Yeah. So we really have a focus on good and full lives for everyone. So while we're paying attention to the services we deliver today, we're also trying to deliver the services of tomorrow or next practice, which are quite different because the individuals we've been serving since the 90s, many of whom didn't have inclusive education or who were living in group homes, have very different needs and interests than some of the youth that are coming in, whose expectations are very much aligned with their typically developing peers. So we need to find ways to support all of the people with disabilities at where they're at and what their goals are. So this is a group here. They're with something called #Limitless, which is a collaboration. They named it, by the way. The youth named it. Which is a collaboration with the Vancouver School Board. And so they are the gateway, if you will. They choose the youth who will participate, and they're going to school part-time, and then they're, with possibilities, accessing our various programs and services the other part of the days, which are helping them gain volunteer skills and employment skills and so on. So that's a new service that we're really enjoying. And there's something also we call Explore. And as parents, the thing you'll appreciate most about this is that you don't have to go back for 4 separate referrals. It's one referral to Explore, which offers 4 different services within it. So this isn't 9 to 3 support, but it is a comprehensive suite of skill building initiatives that youth can participate in, and depending upon how their particular goals and journey looks, they can participate in more than one at once. So that can be interesting. So when you really stack up what a person's goals are and what the supports are they need at that time, you can get better outcomes. That's what we're starting to see with this service. And then I always put in the sexual health one as well, real talk. Because that's where Nick met his girlfriend. So he's now dating. So it's a very good thing. So this is a little about us. You can click on our website and learn more. But posAbilities, the Burnaby Association, Kinsight, which has recently been in the news for most unfortunate death in the community. We all partner on a series of initiatives. So good and full lives for everyone is what we're working towards. And welcome you to ask any questions, anything I may have left out. Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay. And I need to find the other. Rachel?
Yeah,
can you find the
I
other
was
slide?
wondering, Stella's here, but
Yeah, if you just want to help me set up the next slide. If you just, it's on the list.
okay, where is it?
It's on the stick. Right here. David's going to-
Okay,
Oh, here.
here it is. Okay.
And Joette's.
Okay, here we are. Okay. Oh, okay, but why it's still not Monique? It's not. I'm not getting full screen. Monique, I'm not getting full screen. Do you know?
It's up here.
Oh, there. Okay.
There.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Want me to stand right here? Okay. Okay, and you can hear me? Do you want the microphone closer or just speak clear? Okay. So hello everybody. My name is Rachel Goddyn, and I'm a family services consultant with Burnaby Association for Community Inclusion, which you will hear called BACI as well. And I, like Monique, I'm a parent. I have a son who just turned 37, who has a moderate physical and intellectual disabilities. And I have a child who's, a daughter now, who's 25. She was born a boy and is now transitioning to being a woman, and she is not neurotypical. She doesn't have any particular diagnosis, but she's more one of these kind of gray area people. So I've sort of got both ends, a son who's got pretty significant disabilities and a daughter who's got very mild disabilities, or it's hard to say. I read a wonderful report that Joette did recently talking about autism diagnoses, and back in the day it was 80% of people with an autism diagnosis also had an intellectual disability. And today it's 20% of people with an autism diagnosis have an intellectual disability. So a lot of families, who've been getting supports from the Ministry of Children and Families will then, as their child is approaching the transition to adulthood, will have questions about whether or not they're going to have eligibility for Community Living BC services, because Community Living BC has a very different eligibility process than the Ministry of Children and Families supports to children and youth with special needs. So here's a little description of the Community Living BC. And Community Living BC is basically, when my son was transitioning, my 37-year-old was transitioning, you went from Ministry of Children and Families Children's Services to the Ministry of Children and Families Adult Services, and it was all within the Ministry of Children and Families. And in 2005, Community Living BC was set up as a separate organization of sort of a bit of distance from the Ministry of Children and Families. And the reason for that was it was going to hopefully bring in some, innovation, some efficiency. It would allow more participation from families and individuals. I would say as a parent, it's debatable whether that's happened, but that was the vision of Community Living BC. So, but it now means that there's that transition from Ministry of Children and Families to Community Living BC is a little bit more, I'd say, cumbersome for families, a bit more anxiety, with anxiety because you've been getting services and you might not. So it's really important to understand the eligibility. So I gave Stella a handout that's got the eligibility on it. And part of that transition planning, I think, we would really like, if youth can get that eligibility for CLBC to get it, so it's really important to understand that eligibility. There's the handout for the folks at home. There's the handout and a link to the web address where this handout is. So it's really important and to do that planning to get the the psych ed reports that you need that are going to give the evidence you need for your child or your loved one to get those community living BC supports once they turn 19. And that getting that eligibility for the community living BC supports is also how you qualify to get the Navigator program. So getting that, once you get that, and community living BC, you can start qualifying for those supports once your individual turns 16. So once they're 16, you can qualify for those supports and then get onto the Navigator program. So these are some of the supports that CLBC funds. So once you've qualified, you will meet not with a social worker, it's called a facilitator at CLBC. So you meet with a facilitator and these are some of the different supports that you could get. Typically you want, it's sort of like I would think of it as an IEP. We talked about that planning process, and the supports that an individual gets is going to be based on their plan, on that planning process. So that's sort of like creating an IEP, so working on that plan is really important. The Family Support Institute that Monique mentioned, they actually have right now the ability to do planning with families. They have a planning tool called PATH, which is Planning Alternative Tomorrows with Hope. And usually you have to pay to get a PATH, but right now Family Support Institute have an ability to do that for families who are CLBC eligible for free. So that's a really great opportunity. If people want to find out about that, I can give them more information. So that's a really great opportunity. So the supports you get are going to be based on that individual program, plan. And I say my son, when he turned 19, one thing I think that hasn't changed since we went to the new model of CLBC as opposed to children and families is, it's really hard to get funding. You have to advocate really hard. And my son, his disabilities are pretty significant, but when he turned 19, we just got no for everything that we wanted, and it was a year of really hard advocating to get him the day services he needs. So it's, as a parent, it's not easy, especially when you've had a lot of supports when your child's young and you're sort of looking at losing a lot of those supports. It's a pretty difficult journey. So once an individual is approved for a funded service, and I don't want to sound unduly negative, but I think it's really important to start, coming to meetings like this, meeting other parents and finding out about, some advocacy tools as well, and doing the really great planning process. Engaging is important, but there's other parts that need to be done too. And meeting with other parents and finding out what they did, what worked, is really important. So once you're approved for funding as funded service, there's a choice to be made how that service will be delivered. So Monique was speaking about individualized funding, but typically what happens is people will go with a service provider for their service, and there are a number of different service providers. posAbilities and BACI are two of the really biggest service providers, and we have a really wide variety of services, but usually you get a choice of service providers. So that would be provided by the facilitator. They would give you often a choice of 3 service providers, and then you go out and meet with those service providers, ask them a lot of questions, talk to them about what the service would look like, and then you choose your service provider. So and you want one that's going to be a good fit for you, and you feel that really is listening to you and you've got a good working relationship with. So my son is getting the next piece, this is what I do as at BACI. My role at BACI is a family services consultant, and we have ongoing programs. We have a music therapy group for young children. We have a wonderful monthly support group for Chinese families that's run by John Sang, and that's a wonderful resource. John's great. He's so knowledgeable and so empathetic and caring. And then we have a bi-monthly e-newsletter with events and news of interest to Burnaby families. And we also do some workshops. So recently we did a workshop on the RDSP level 2. So that's for people who have had an RDSP for a while and want to know more about making your RDSP as efficient as possible and learning a bit about withdrawals and rollovers. So we do workshops, and then I can help people. Often just referring them to really good resources around doing wills and financial planning, information about some government programs. So I have my flyers and my card are over there, and I work with families in Burnaby and New Westminster. Kinsight works with families who are in the Tri-Cities area, and Developmental Disabilities Association has a family support program that runs in Vancouver. And they also have a wonderful Vancouver Parents Transition Group that's running out of Vancouver that I would really highly recommend. And here's my son. So my son gets, now he's 37, he's getting day and residential supports from BACI. So his day program, he's with a group, so they go, it's a community-based program, so he goes in the morning and meets up at one of our buildings, our main building, it's at Still Creek. So he meets up and he goes out in a group, so it's usually 1 or 2 staff and 2 to 6 individuals, and these are different things he's done around the community. And then he now is in home share as well. So he's lives with a woman that he's lived with her for 6 years. They have a wonderful relationship, and that's gone really, really well. The home share's been really great. So he's getting residential services also through BACI. So I would say, for me as a parent, one of the biggest surprises for me was how much my son learned through his 20s. I think you think, okay, 19, you're not going to see huge changes, but I think, for kids who are not developing on a typical trajectory, you often see, huge growth through their 20s, and that was an amazing surprise to me, and I'm just so proud of how much, independence and how much my son's learned. So, that's been wonderful. So that's my presentation, and I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Julian, Meaghen, Monique, and Rachel for sharing their experience and also service for people. It's time for questions and answers. I would like to know, do you guys want to ask first or hear more about this, and then Joette present before you ask? Or it doesn't matter.
I'm happy to go down if you want.
Okay, so perhaps I'll talk a little bit about this list that I put together, and then Joette can come over now. So I put together this list that everyone should have one, and it's out there if you don't have one. So this is a Burnaby resource list. So basically the information is for Burnaby, and there are some more from nearby cities. Like for example, the Family Support Institute is there too that Monique was talking about. And I wanted to point out one thing from Autism BC. So if you go to page 2, Autism BC, there's a link there that's direct you to resource called Prepare to Launch. So basically, this is the Prepare to Launch program. So this program was originally from Calgary, from the Cine Family Foundation, and they shared this with us. So we adapt that, and it's a workshop that can last for a few hours. So we actually put this online, so you can, if you go to our website, you can access that for free. So there are like very, very comprehensive steps that you can do with your teens or youth or even adult that you can do. And you can access also some general resource at the back. that's general to BC, because this one is for BC, not necessarily just for Burnaby. So if you go to the back, like there are more than 100 pages. So you can take your time to go online and search it, or you can print out the pages that you think is helpful to your family. But this is very useful, right? And then there are lots of other things like education, employment, social skills, or housing and stuff like that. A lot of info here. And one of the very good resource is the SCorpig Society, which I put also on one of the pages, page 2, the top. And Joette is the parent that has been running this for a long time, and she has been really helping a lot of people. So I will have Joette come out to talk about SCorpig Society. Thank you.
Okay, see if we can work this out.
I'll just talk while she's doing it. So I'm really happy to be here as well for 2 reasons, because being with a group of people so open and transparent and willing to share information has been so important, and I welcome it. And also because I too am a parent of a autistic young man, and our transition process didn't exist. So to be around people that are approaching transition in a really mindful, strategic way is what we wished we would have had. Post-high school for us, it was crash and burn. And my son now, a happy ending sort of, we're still on that path, but he also, his name is Aaron, he graduated from Moscrop as well, and he turned 28 in November and graduated from SFU at Christmas. So we're excited about that. But post-high school, that was our impetus for starting SCorpig. We started in 2014 because we felt that adults were just not well supported. And for us, we had autism intervention funding until 19, and then surprise, surprise, there was nothing. He was not considered eligible. And this has to do somewhat with this transition where the bulk of the people on the spectrum were regarded as having intellectual as well as developmental disabilities, and the criteria was aligned accordingly. And for those people who didn't fit, there really wasn't a place for them. And we found that we just didn't fit, and the families that have become our members also have are not found themselves to be not eligible. But that isn't really the point. The real point was that they saw themselves as wanting to move on a path of independence, where they were envisioning themselves as living separately from their families at some point, and we wanted to explore ways to help them along with that vision in whatever way we could, them and their families, to the extent that that was possible. So our focus has been on those issues of independence, or that will, those adult issues, we'll just say. So post-secondary education, employment, housing, mental health, and life and social skills. And what do I do to change?
Down arrow.
Down arrow.
I can show you if you can.
Okay, got it. So how we see ourselves doing that is information sharing like this, emotional support, talking to each other, and alliances with other organizations to partner to share information, because even though our focus is on adults and on a slightly different sector of the ASD, the ASD population, we're all walking the same walk, and some of the issues may be weighted a little bit more or less heavily in one area or another, and at different times, depending on the phase that our kid is in or our lives are in, we have to go where they are. And if it's about the social part at one point, if it's about the employment part, it may happen at different times because our development path is different. And so we try to connect with as much information on all of these issues as we can, because at one point we'll be there. And then advocacy. We see that the services haven't existed, particularly the mental health services. And just one small example of the items that we'd like to change, we put into our document that we submitted to the government on while they're going through the process of developing accessibility legislation. And that was around the issue of diagnosis. So many of our SCorpig members, they either were not diagnosed because if they weren't flagged in school or there wasn't a behavioral issue, often they went through to adulthood without a diagnosis. And that has impacts for obtaining a disability tax credit, our RDSP, accommodations in post-secondary, all of those things that without that, they're struggling. And so having access paid for by the government to psychoed analysis paid up front would be a real boon to our sector of the population. So issues like that we talked about, or that we advocate for. Just to give you an example of some of the meetings that we did in 2019. So we tried to do about 8 meetings a year, and they were on supports in post-secondary institutions. There was a meeting on employment preparedness, a couple of meetings where we talked to different municipalities about what we see our needs being in order to make their workplaces inclusive of us. We, as a prelude to our relationship and healthy sexuality workshop that we did in September, we did a meeting with some of our young adults to talk about where they see themselves being at and their hopes and aspirations. And then we had a meeting where we had people contribute their ideas to form our submission for the accessibility legislation. And then we concluded last year with a meeting on strategies and opportunities for social connections, which we still find is real challenge. Okay, and then for what we're planning for this year, what we've kind of got going, generally our meetings are Thursday evenings, and they're in Burnaby. I'll just give you some of the things in the near future. So February 22nd, we're starting a 3-series workshop for adults 19 and up called Modern Love, and it's on meetups and online dating, and it's with facilitators John Woods and Dee Stacy from Real Talk, who are excellent, and this is a follow-up to the relationship and sexuality. Excuse me. February 27th, we're having a meeting on social conversations with a behavioral interventionist who Stella has had her here before, but she's going to be focusing this time on, her name is Crystal Clark, and she's going to be focusing on the adult population. And then on February 29th, we're doing a tax return workshop with Disability Alliance. So we're going to walk through filing our tax returns there in person. So it's an opportunity for our young adults to perhaps fill their own tax return on their own. 26th of March is another workshop with the Disability Alliance, just a review of the disability tax credit and the RDSP. Again, those how to apply so that you have the best chance of success. It's tricky, again, because as in our case, after 19 we received no funding because, and again, it's not about the funding, it's about all the other pieces that come with that. But it was just, our son was seen as being too high functioning, and it's, and I won't go into why that's problematic, but it's really helpful to have an advocate who knows the ropes and knows the language to use. So we're going to go through that. And then the 28th, we have, which should be a really fun thing, the 28th of March, is an info teaser for our workshop that we're running. This is a program through the STADD on confidence building through drama. And it's 8 sessions. We're going to do 2 in this year. And I'm really excited about the facilitators, instructors for this program. One of them is a Langara Studio 58 graduate. She's worked a lot with people with social issues. She's worked in the school, and and we're really building this as a mixed program to inspire confidence through drama. And we're doing this teaser at the STADD on the 28th. Friends of mine, Little Mountain Trio, are doing bluegrass. We're having drama games just as a kind of introduction to this program. So that's it. Monique has a couple posters. Where would
The next slide.
the next slide? Okay, so there's a poster for the Modern Love, and then the poster for the drama program. That's it.
So it's question time. I think we can either collect the cards if you're already written down your question, or you can raise your hand and then you just ask your question.
I missed the date for the RDSP tax workshop, not the 29th, but the other February date.
Oh, for actually like
February 29th.
February 29th.
And it's it's on the tax returns, and have the tax return February 29th. And it's at McGill Library Branch.
McGill Library.
1:30. And anyone who's interested, I can just take their email and send them.
Yeah.
the
And
info.
if you have any question, you can always like send an email to me, then I will answer your question if you miss it.
Okay, and then my other question is those workshops on dating and stuff, are those for parents or do we bring the child with us? Or
This is for the young adults, 19 and up, on their own.
oh, okay.
Yeah. The workshops are for the adults, like it's organized by SCorpig.
The drama program is open to anybody.
Yeah.
So you can come with your young person, or you can come with your own, or they can come. It starts April 18th, but the teaser is the 28th.
28, thank you.
Next month, like February the 21st, Autism BC in this room, we have an Autism in Texas workshop here. And then March the 13th, we have Autism and Social Skills, also a program here. March 13th, and it's with behavior consultant Connie Ng. So she runs the peers programs too for adult and also for teens. So like your question, like who has a question? Okay.
Yep. This is for Monique. So you were talking about your decision and Nick's decision in his plus year to have part of his time out in the community. So I'm wondering who provided that support in community? So he's still in school, and so part of that time in community, and could you just talk a bit about how that was set up and who was that support?
Yes, absolutely. So we've been dealing with autism funding all our lives since Nick was 3. So I was comfortable with individualized funding, and I knew that I wanted to do that through adulthood as well. So we also had a long-standing relationship with the Burnaby School Board, in that the principal director of instruction at that time, it transferred from Deborah Seamak to Elizabeth Gardner, and she knew my son very well. So she advocated for us, and we're part of a pilot program. So it was a shared arrangement. So it was the school with the EA during the daytime, and then we had CLBC funding because Nick was 19. And so we hired community support workers for the afternoon. So he still had his one-to-one in school, and then he had his one-to-one at home as well. And so we collaborated.
So when you talked about the CLBC in the afternoon,
That's how it
starting
ended
after
for
3
us.
o'clock?
12.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
from 12.
two periods in the morning in school, and then instead of having 2 periods in the afternoon, that's when our support worker would come and pick up Nick, and they'd go on. Yeah,
So it was organized through the family?
Yeah, it was, we advocated for a smooth transition year, and that was what we came up with as a plan that would work for everybody. Yeah.
Okay, presenters, please say the question again so the Facebook people can listen to it. Okay, next time.
Okay.
I think there's a question from Facebook Live people. What is Navigator? So maybe Meaghen or Julian can answer.
Yes, that's right. We thank you, Facebook Live, for the question. What is Navigator? So that is our official job title, and as navigators, the points of reference would be 16 to 24 years of age. We recently moved from Ministry for Social Development to Ministry for Children, so that's where we're housed. But the responsibility to person-centered planning and team-based supports would be our job. We certainly carry a caseload of around 60 youth each, and are responsible for engaging those team members as directed by that youth and their support network. So that's us. The term navigator is our job title.
Thank you. Any other questions? Maybe you go ahead, please.
I'm wondering how many additional years of high school our children can access.
Repeat the question.
And I don't know who to direct it to.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We have to repeat the question.
Right, sorry. Look at this. I wonder how many additional years of high school can young people access. So I believe it is 19th birthday. If your 19th birthday happens after the first of the school year, then you're entitled to the school year.
July 1st.
July 1st is that cutoff date, so if you were born, your birthday was, I'll use my daughter, I shouldn't say that. I'll use a birthday, I'll use mine now, July 23rd, then it starts after the school year, so I would turn 19 after the school year, so I would be eligible for another year. I'm no longer 19, of course. That's for Facebook. Does that answer your question? So
It does, but I thought that they could access it for longer if they needed more time to complete their dogwood. Like longer than their 19th year.
Yes, can students access for longer? So my observation has typically been at some point there will be a shift within the school district. So depending on your school district, there can be a shift over to adult courses that may or may not be hosted in the high school, and they might transition over to a separate adult education space. Biggest piece around that, though, is starting that conversation early and as soon as possible.
Yeah, in addition to the STADD Navigator, I saw one of your the one that you discussed, it says assets based, something like that. What do you mean by that? Like, it will, no?
Sure.
It will base.
Repeat the question first.
asset-based, so the way I would describe asset-based to a young person is all the gifts and qualities that they bring, right? So all of the things, we all have gifts, abilities, interests, right? And so we're focusing on how can we take what you've got naturally, line up your goals and sort of expand those, or find new opportunities to build, that would be my, anyone else choose to
Not a
add
legal
to that?
connotation, that's right.
Yeah.
I'll add to that. There might have been a little bit of confusion because there was another reference to assets and community assets. So when we talk about community assets, it's places of like radical hospitality, what we have in maybe our faith communities, our community centers, clubs, just great spaces that we can build community around our youth from. So community assets. And there was a website that the Family Support Institute hosts just for that, identifying those places.
Okay, just
Yeah.
good to know. I thought
Yeah.
it was like,
Two different
so
assets.
I think for me, if that is your explanation, it should be ability or capability of the child. Is it not? For me, just like assets is something, you know, properties.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, the lady wearing glasses.
So I'm just wondering if you could address the STADD wait list. Like in my case, my referral went in May 2019, and also I know that it moved between social development, social innovation over to MCFD. So has that impacted, or is there not enough navigators? There's no money to hire navigators. Like, can you just address that?
Repeat question.
Sure, so the question is around Navigator wait lists and then also transition from MSD to MCFD as impacts to the program. We can have a sideline conversation with like specifics to exactly your situation after, unless, would you like to share which community you are in?
North Delta.
In North Delta, okay. So, important piece of the history of the Navigator program is the beginnings of the program were very much piloted. So Surrey was one pilot site along with the North Island, the interior that started as Kamloops and spread to Merritt, and then rural remote, the north of BC. And so that's pretty recent history. That would have been, we launched for the Lower Mainland in Surrey in 2015. 14? And so Surrey spread into your community of Delta and Langley as a part of that expansion. Burnaby and New West we launched 3 years ago, 2017. So certainly, as we had mentioned, the Navigator program is not provincial in scope or mandate. The research and findings and benchmarks to the Navigator program are, I think, of families questioned, over 80% said the Navigator role was extremely helpful. To your point around wait lists, it is absolutely possible to be in touch with we have a team leader that we report to, right? So feel free to take our contact information. And that piece around making sure they know that your waiting is very important.
I emailed the team leader.
Great, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's fantastic. What was the second question? It was around shift. Yeah, so shift, that's right. So April 1st, we shifted from Ministry of Social Development to Ministry for Children. As of yet, there's been, outside of like, you know, the logistics of office changes and things, there's been no change to our role. Thank you.
I had something in response to what she was saying that may be quite interesting to parents, because my son didn't do well in mainstream school. So I put him actually at 16, and he was quite behind, into an online school called eBus, which has thousands of dollars per year for funding in addition to your autism funding, and it's been phenomenal with the support workers, and he's now only has one more subject and he'll be getting his dogwood. So yeah, it's a great resource for any parents whose child's struggling in mainstream, and that funding is great for him. Yeah. It's called eBus, so I think it was like $6,000 a year in addition to your autism funding per year. And the teachers are quick in getting back to you. You can call the resource teacher all the time. It's really, really good way to get your child graduated if they're struggling in the mainstream school level social issues. Yeah.
Our son is one of the ending year people, so he's got an extra year of high school, but he's in a separate program that's directed certainly toward kids with autism. And I would like to get him into some sort of general outlet in the campus college, or so that he would actually have experience with a lot of other people with other abilities, so that he's more in the community. And I'm wondering what are the possibilities of that?
So sorry, I have to remember to frame the question again. So what is the possibility, so there's a little context there around a young man who's currently in a separate school who is receiving service and looking at trying to help him engage and transition with other folks into Douglas College.
Yes.
Right, getting that? Okay. So is that possible? Yes. There are all sorts of ways in which we can help support youth and families who are looking to explore post-secondary education options, whether that's through the mainstream level or looking at other adapted programs that may be out there, or continuing their working towards or pursuing their dogwood at those levels. So I would say definitely we can talk a little bit more around that. And just talk about the various steps involved in that. But you can contact the school, you can do visits with various programs that you're interested in, attending information nights as a way to start to explore what might be the right fit. And then you can also discuss with accessibility services the types of modifications or adaptations that would be helpful in making your child as successful as can be in that environment as well. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways. So that would be part of my response, but I'm sure if anyone else has other pieces to add to that.
Orientations at Douglas, there's multiple a month of general orientations, and then program-specific orientations are happening weekly. Yeah, if you're looking at next year for diploma degree programs, now is the time to be applying. That application is simply their 2-page application. Their admission office in Burnaby is now in the big Rotunda area. $34 application. You get your Douglas College number and choose your top 2 choices for programming. If you're interested, yeah, the skills training program. There's basic occupation education program, very much hands-on skills training programs in foods, electronics, retail, and exploration. So just go. Yeah.
Actually, on the list that I gave you guys, like there are other post-secondary opportunities that you can also explore, like Douglas, BCC, and also Quanine. There are others there, so you can go to the link. Like I put this, I think page 3. So you can go to the link and take a look, and then you can explore what is suitable for your child. And usually they will have funding for tuition, so you don't have to pay for funding. It's an adult funding that's called, I forgot the long name, but then it's a funding for tuition, so you can apply for it automatically. If he has a disability, then it's all covered. There's some question from Facebook. I'll just read this one out. It's from Alan. He has 2 questions, and I think he's a brother of someone who has autism, and he wants to ask, this is actually a question for parents. He said, the young child is too high functioning. Reasoning has been an ongoing issue for my brother as well. A school relocates the fundings toward other children who appear to be of special needs yet has not received proper diagnosis. Why is it that parents of those children refuse to receive the fundings instead of laissez-faire attitude? It's a complicated question. So I can, like, before other parents reply, maybe I can, as a parent, I share my own experience. For any parents who receive a diagnosis, it's very emotional. Like either you receive it when a child is 2 or 18 or any age, is very emotional. It takes time to digest it, and everyone has a different response. Some will take longer to go through the grieving stage, that you have to think about, oh, I lost hope of my child. My dream is have my child to become this professional, or then now you have to adjust your dream. And then to go through that, and then you go through feeling very sad, and then you go through acceptance, right? There's some people, it may take more than a year. a year or a few years or even longer to accept that. And if the parent themselves, if they have problem to accept it, it will be really hard for them to just move on and go to apply for funding. Like they have problem even going for a diagnosis, especially for if the child appear typical, but then just a little bit like maybe the social skill is not kind of normal. We'll wait and see if he or she is going to grow out of it. Or if there's some emotional issues, kind of like there's some emotional control issues, so you just feel, oh, maybe he will get better next year. And then a year pass, and some, I heard that they saw a doctor, and the doctor said that, oh, your child is actually fine. It's just a little bit of speech delay, just wait a year, wait for another year. So all sorts of questions. So the best thing is to try to support parents, because I'm a parent too and I support parents. The best thing is to listen and to support, but not to judge. Why are you having a laissez-faire attitude? Because parents actually have a hard time. We all want our best for the child, but then how we deal with it, everyone is different. And the best is to start now. Start where you're at now. Whether your child is 16, 25 is always a good point to start now. Because if we just look back and see what we have missed, it doesn't really help. But if you start now and looking for a way to help our child, it's never too late. Like Rachel shared that her child actually learned the best when he's in his 20s, right? So it's like always a good point to start is now, and to try our best. So, and if it's maybe there are other children of that parent that doesn't understand, the children can also come here. If you are adult sibling, you can also come here to attend meetings, and you can see other parents, or you can phone me, and then I can try to connect you with other support, maybe other siblings who is going through the same stage of like trying to figure out what's wrong and trying to help. Any other people want to make a comment?
I just want to add to that as well, Stella, around, I think that there's stigma that goes with a student being, receiving special attention at school, and their friends see, their peers see that this person is the student's getting extra attention. And so there's the other aspect of it. Maybe if you wait a little bit longer, your son or daughter may not need that attention anymore. You're always kind of not sure what to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's pros and cons in getting funding. Like some parents I know who may choose not to get funding because they can afford to not get it, and they prefer to allow their other people who need it more than, I don't know, there's pros and cons with getting funding, right? Yeah. For some parents, if they can afford not to, then they will do so.
Thank you, Joette. Any other comments from parents?
I'm not a parent, I'm an educator.
Okay.
And it just so happened yesterday we were talking about this subject, and we were talking about the need, so I'm from Richmond, along with my colleague here, Cindy. The need to acknowledge positionality and privilege, and the intersectionality between nationality, class, gender. I think that all plays in, and it's really important when we're dealing with a wide range of families to take that into consideration. There's a whole host of reasons why this can be really challenging for an individual, and having that perspective of difference, I think, is really helpful.
I guess like this is an educator from the school district, Richmond School District, right? Yeah, thanks for joining us. This may be a question for you, because the same person from Facebook,
okay.
Yeah, he asked, do the individual education plans get reviewed by other autism institutes than just the special support teachers in school? Here you go.
I can give you my take on that. So it is, it's a Ministry of Education mandate And so it's housed within the auspices of an educational school district and individual school. I think the beauty is that more so than ever, I've been doing this for 30 years, we work extremely collaboratively, so we always ask families when it's time to do the review, which we are obligated to do that once a year. The reality is you can do it as many times as needed. So if a parent wants to have that review multiple times in a year, that's fine. I think the point here is that we always ask parents to please bring with you your partners. So I think that there's always that opportunity. So I want to have that person that posed the question to be really hopeful about that. And it's within the parent's right to bring whomever they wish to the meeting. I hope that answered the question.
And I would echo that too. We love individual educational planning meetings simply because it's a fabulous time for teams to come together, and for as teams are shifting, those new team members to join in and learn from the under 19 teams as well. So those are fantastic opportunities. Individual education plans can also have a lot of goals related to transition. So it's a fantastic way to include whatever those goals might be around independence, transition, work experience, academic goals.
There's a question about, tell me more about Explore.
Sure.
Did you answer already?
I didn't yet, I was just
Okay.
waiting for the right
Okay, sorry.
moment.
So this is a Facebook question too.
Thanks. So Explore is one of the newer services that was developed by posAbilities, and there may be similar ones in different associations. So for us, what it involves is a lot of youth self-determination. So there's a discovery process with the young person, and they're making choices about what they want to do with their life. There's a whole journey mapping process. The role is actually called Journey Facilitator. And once the individual has sort of made those choices, what the research is finding so far for us the first couple of years, they're more likely to attach to the services that are meaningful to them. And once they attach to the services they need that they choose, they'll be more successful. And as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, they can occur simultaneously or stretched out or over a longer period of time. It could be several years. The thing is, though, the individuals are likely to be successful in this, they need to be thinking about employment or wanting to be developing skills towards employment. So any age, not just transitioning youth, and one gateway. So they don't have to go back to their facilitator at Community Living BC each time they want to do a bit more skill development. If it's within the list of options in Explore, it's their journey facilitator who will make sure they get a spot in those specific spaces as they need them.
Is there an upper age limit on?
No.
Can you ask the question? Can you repeat the question? Is there any age?
Sorry. The question was, is there an age limit? No, Explore is open to youth and adults of all ages who are interested in employment.
Can I ask a question for Joette, actually? And it has to do with transitioning for teens who may not fall under some of the programs that our speakers have spoken to. So in terms of practical tips for how to prepare for post-secondary and what's available in the process.
Joette, you want to come up?
So the question, to rephrase for the audience, is what are practical tips for students who may not be feeling CLBC eligible, but who require supports? How do you help them prepare for post-secondary?
Am I okay here? At the risk of sounding negative, our experience was it didn't exist a few years ago. And so an IEP was talked about every year, but didn't happen. It was something that we're going to get this happening, we're going to get this happening, and then it was like into November before we were offered a meeting. As well, we had a special education assistant for all of 2 months, really, through his whole high school years. And he was profoundly unhappy. And through the later years, post-high school, he was suicidal. And so we really struggled. The emergency services were, emergency mental health services were good, but then after that, he'd sort of rebound and the long-term care wasn't there. So what I would say is all of these things that the people are talking about here, think of the whole person, you know, not just getting them through high school, but what it is that makes them happy, what connections they can have to the community. A Nick's connection with the church is really important. Any community volunteering, adult mentors, and recognize, be very, I was a bit, more than a bit, intimidated because I was always afraid that I would worsen the situation for my son. I felt like I had to play ball with the school system in order to not ostracize him further. And had I do it, so be aware of your rights. As this educator said here, be aware that you can bring people to the meetings, insist upon the meetings. So we were dancing this dance. We felt because we were a family of modest means, we couldn't pay thousands of dollars to send him to another school. And again, because he was high functioning, we knew that most of his interactions in later life would have to be with the broader community because that's where the reality was for him. And so we had to ensure that he had connections with the broader reality and the broader community. So for us putting him in a special school, even if we had the resources, we felt wouldn't be in his best interests. The other thing that happens with SEs, special education assistants, is that they were so, at that time, directly attached to the individual. So they stigmatized them, as you were describing. And so anytime there is an opportunity for the school and the school educators to include the other students in your child's development and make them aware that this person has this different way of seeing things or these different needs, but they're a student like any other. And so we didn't push for the special education assistants to appear because, one, they were poorly paid and poorly educated, and they were just not available to us. The poor, at that time, the resource person was like operating between 10 schools and had all her files in the back of her car, and we saw her never. And okay, let's try and figure out
we get it.
Make sure you're insist upon your kid being integrated, that you don't want a person that's following them around the playground that further identifies them as a person who's different. Look for the ways in which you're always look for the assets in your kid and the things that will make them show the ways in that they can contribute, and they can. And sometimes it's by kindness or openness or whatever, and that those are valid ways of making a contribution. And so explore. We did a social circle for our son where we invited everybody we knew, and that was one of the things that we had to learn. Don't be afraid to ask. If you divvy up the workload between all of the people you know, you won't be a particular burden on one person or one family member or whatever. And it's better for your kid in the end to have a pool of people that they trust and that you trust and that give them a different perspective than yours, right? Aside from your burnout factor, and just that you also come with your own limitations and biases. And so the more people you bring into your kid's life, the richer their life will be, and the more they'll learn from these other people. So we built a social circle. We had meetings a few times a year, and so we exchanged emails. My son to this day goes to the Stanley Theatre for their series with two people that are our neighbors and our friends, and they've invited a niece of theirs to join them, and so it does snowball. So I would say volunteerism, community links, part-time jobs, drawing on all of the resources that you have around you, and then understand that if your kid takes longer, it's okay. I too saw, as Rachel described, saw lots of growth in my son over his 20s, and that growth has been in what I call somewhat letting go of the Peter Pan syndrome. Because his life was so miserable, he was living in this world of fantasy, and anything that didn't measure up to that made him more disappointed. And so he's tempered that, and he's helpful, and he's looking for ways himself of becoming a well-rounded person. And so in that we celebrate, because we see lots of growth and that, and we're not there yet, a greater sense of contentment. So build a whole person. Don't just focus on the school or one thing. Build a whole person and a whole life, and in whatever ways you can see to make that happen.
Thank you so much. So I actually want to add a couple of points. So other than that, because I also hear from parents who told me all over the years the child's problem, the adult child's problem. So other than the job, volunteering, social support, and well-being, the mental health is also very, very important. I have heard from parents that their child is already in a post-secondary, seems to be doing really well, like when they get in, and then they don't let their child get support because the adult child doesn't want anyone to know that they have ASD. And after the first semester, second semester, they are falling apart because they do need support. And then they started to have mental health problem. They miss school, they cannot get up, they cannot get out of the house, they miss school, and then they're falling downhill. So it's very important to be ahead, like a few steps ahead, to know that they actually need support. Even though academically they're doing really well, doesn't mean that their autism has suddenly gone away. Yeah. And also being active, like if they like some kind of sport, keep them in a team or in some regular practice. For example, my son, he has joined a special Olympic when he's like 15 years old, and he's still doing it. He's 14, 15, and he's still going swimming once a week, going basketball once a week, and sometimes he also do track and field, and he really loved it. After he got his first ribbon, that he knows that I can do it, right? Because these people, they race, they can get a ribbon because they're racing against people similar to them, right? So there's a high chance that they may get a place like first, second, third, right? And then they're very happy. They will keep doing it, and that's also for their health, their well-being. Okay.
I was just going to add a couple of things to that. A lot of times when you think of individuals with autism, they tend to be perceptive or perhaps stuck in their ways. The Kudos Experience platform that has been tremendous for my son. You can throw him into any situation with any stranger who's teaching a skill, and it's really been a confidence builder. So just a little tool there. And also I think thinking about family values and where people are around their thoughts on medication. But medication was also a key factor in controlling the anxiety so that I can participate in other things. Yeah, so sometimes just opening up and trying something new, finding the right psychiatrist. And in post-secondary, they mostly have counselors attached to the schools. You can often get to a psychiatrist more quickly through a post-secondary than you can in the private market or the regular way that we access specialists. So if mental health is a concern, there's supports there at that level too.
Kudos is actually on the resource list that you have, so you can access the phone number and also the link, and you can look if you don't have.
Can I add one thing, just about mental health supports? That is a real weakness. And so, as Monique described there, yes, they're available through post-secondary educations. They're usually crisis-based, and they're limited in the number of sessions. You can't get the same counselor all the time. And so there are, if anyone, the problem is that when then you can't function on any level. None of us can. And so advocacy around mental health supports is required from all of us, I think, because but they're piecemeal and they're not well developed enough, you know. This whole, $250 an hour for psychological counseling is just not sustainable for families. And often individuals with ASD, they may or may not fit into a group counseling thing because there may be a lot of people there with other issues like drug addiction or other issues where our kids may fit, but they may not. And sometimes their social anxiety is high and they don't fit well into group sessions either. Sometimes they don't. So as a community, building realistic mental health supports, because they very much need it and they're not there to the extent that they should be.
Okay, who hasn't asked? You haven't asked much.
I have a question. We're at the very beginning of this. Our child is in high school, but no diagnosis. We're just cluing it. This is likely what it is. So he's high functioning in a sense, but it's been hell for years for us because he holds it together pretty well at school. Challenges with socially, but academically doing okay. Always anxiety issues, all those things. So we've got tapped into different things in the community. All out of pocket. He'll probably get a diagnosis, we think, but we're at the beginning, but we're afraid that he may be too high functioning to get that. And I'm just wondering, for people who are at the beginning of this process, how to access some of these community resources, knowing that, well, A, we don't have funding right now, and B, we may never get funding.
How old is your son?
13.
Okay, 13.
I can give you some insight. You can actually phone us because we also got a lot of people phone and ask that where shall we start, right? So the diagnosis and then the where do we go for possible programs without funding or without paying anything. There is something out there, but then there are different things. So you can phone, for example, in Richmond, the Pacific Autism Family Network. There are lots of different organizations there that are tenants that they have programs, and PFN also themselves sometimes they have program for people that already past the age of children. So there is some support, that not a lot, but then there is something. You can call and I can talk to you more.
I would also say push for Sunny Hills because my son suffered drastically and ended up getting a lot of depression because the school wasn't pinpointing it, and I pushed myself. They sent him to all the counselors, everything, and psychiatrists. They were saying, send him to military school, he's misbehaving, all this stuff. I pushed for Sunny Hills, and he got his diagnosis finally at 16, and he could have been avoiding all that. He dropped out of school because of it. That's how we got to EBUS, and EBUS does continue past 19, just the funding's not there. But really push for the child to go to Sunny Hills because they will get a diagnosis.
Yeah, because the schools recognize Sunny Hills, they don't recognize private diagnosis.
Actually, the school should recognize all kind of diagnoses, not just private. If they don't recognize, you should advocate. All the school district, private or through government, is a diagnosis is recognized.
Can I say something about how one, why one as a family? Absolutely, if you're ready and you're willing to go through that process, and certainly talk to Stella and everybody else about how to apply with all your ducks lined up. What it does within a family, I think, is that it opens the conversation about this issue in your home, and that has, I think, that has growth potential for all of us and for your individual. My son has decided that when he's in a job interview, he won't put his diagnosis in his resume, but he will look for an opportunity in an interview stage. And he says that the reason why he does that is because then it him to assess what their management style is, what their training process is, whether he'd fit in. And he gets it out of the way. And so for me, I was so proud of him to hear that, because I felt like he's had the conversation in our household enough that he's internalized it, and he's saying, I can live with this. I can own this diagnosis and carry on and go forward. And I don't think you can do that if you don't get to that place where you can speak about it within your family and know that there's life beyond the diagnosis, and you can have fun and you can do things together, and that it doesn't define everything about him or her. It's a good process to go through as a family, I think.
There's a question from Facebook people.
Yeah, the question was for posAbilities. Besides peers, is there any other social group? Fortunately, I don't know what age we're targeting. I'm going to presume teens or young adults. So we do have a couple of things that are going on. Through our employment service for young adults who are working, there's something called the Tuesday Triple. And it's a job club, a social club, meet and eat. They have supper and do social skills stuff. And then afterwards, it's a speaking club. So a bit of skill development in a nice format. But that would be for adults who are working. Then we have also a skill camp that pairs up with the peers. We aren't offering it this spring break, but we will in the summer. So it's like put together so that people are looking for a bit of a program with a few hours, social skill development and employment readiness camp put together. So that will come up for the summer. And also for adults, we have the Buddy Club, which is a social opportunity hanging out weekly for a few hours, and that takes place in New West, and there are out trips and sometimes hanging out, cooking together and just watching movies, very social. We have the Dating Club, Let's Get Real, which is a spin-off from Building Caring Communities, so that's 19 plus. So that takes place, it's just adults meeting up in different places in community with light support from facilitators if they need it, or they're called community connectors. And I think that's it for social connections.
So I live in Vancouver, and I have a daughter who was just recently diagnosed ASD. She's 16. I feel like I'm really behind the game in getting to know the ins and outs of the services. Where would I plug in to start to have like a navigator for the parent who's like, okay, this is where you're at. These are the services that would be, so I could figure it out in Vancouver.
Do you have the autism funding? Does she have the autism funding?
She has, yeah. So we have to send the report to the ministry, and we're waiting for that.
You can talk to the social worker to connect if she's eligible, right? The eligibility for a navigator. Is anyone eligible or
no? We have to be CLBC eligible.
In terms of family support, so connecting to the transition group in Vancouver, I think is a fantastic support.
Yeah, I can give you information
Vancouver.
on that group. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, to UCO. And then the Family Support Institute, in terms of family mentorship programs, would be able to connect you typically to other families who've recently walked your journey. So oftentimes it might be Vancouver based, it might be a family that's maybe 2021, those kinds of benchmarks for you. You've done the right thing in terms of being in touch with your child and youth with special needs team in Vancouver and liaise with them to coordinate what the outcome will be from the assessment you've submitted. But that will open up a host of supports through Ministry for Children.
So when you say child and youth with special needs, is that through the ministry?
Yeah.
MCFD.
Yeah,
so
that's
you're already in connection. That's the social worker.
Okay. So MCFD will have like a child protection. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
First place to go is MCFD.
So they have child protection services, and then they have services for children and youth with special needs. So and that's separate. So that's why we say children and youth with special needs to differentiate it from the protection side.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's still all Ministry of Children and Families.
So
Yeah.
we
So that's the
usually
first.
say it's CYSN,
Yeah.
or children and youth with special needs, the CYSN social worker.
Yeah.
Your child probably already has one because she's diagnosed and you're connected with her.
Well, it should happen in the next couple months.
Yeah. Oh, it should be, I mean, if you've got the autism diagnosis, it should happen sooner than, if it's not happening within a couple of months, keep phoning.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you're gonna get your you're gonna become a squeaky wheel, yeah.
And Jules has the journey map for you. Diagnosis, assessment piece aside, it's helpful for everybody.
Okay. You can also call Autism BC, you can also call me to have more information. There's another question.
I have a question about the CLBC eligibility. So on the handout, it talks about an assessment. Is that a full psych ed? Is that what we're talking about? And what is the ideal age to have that done specifically for the CLBC eligibility purposes?
Sure, I can take that one. So the question is around eligibility for community living, British Columbia, for some youth. Diagnosis of birth, age 2, age 4, age 6 is enough. And for other youth, it can be reassessment. That's required at 13, 14, 15. Certainly, each youth is as diverse can be. My biggest suggestion is that you approach Community Living British Columbia, so they're mandated through their policy at 16 for that receipt of assessment, and say these are the pieces that I have for my child, and what does that mean for eligibility components. You know your child best though, so if you believe that psych ed is required around that 13th, 14th, 15th mark, then that is something oftentimes schools have wait lists to receive, okay? And school psychologists, psychoeducational assessments are really important for more than just CLBC eligibility. There is a wonderful amount of information that you'll garner from those psych eds that are really, really wonderful to put into individual education plans, create goals, have ideas from psychologists who've seen all youth being tested in that school district.
But they have to be current though. It can't be one from when they're 12.
That might
I've heard that
be
they
all
need to be
right.
more current than
Yeah, it really depends on your youth's diagnosis. Yeah.
There's the educator here
So,
that can
I just
answer.
wanted to add to that so the educational psychologist in your school district will be able to have a look and do a file review for that, look at the psych ed assessment and make a determination what needs to be done. So for some, nothing needs to be done. For others, it's just a review. And as a result of that, the school psychologist is, their job is to fill out what's called a CLBC assessor report. Parent signs off and it basically says the eligibility piece there. I can tell you now, big red flag, what ends up happening is we've learned in our district that we have to keep a copy in the confidential file, and then a copy goes to the parents. But in order for true eligibility to happen, the parent has to bring that to CLBC. Otherwise, they have no idea who you are. And it's so important to get into that fiscal budget. So I'm dealing with that as we speak today. I'm going home, going back to my district and calling those parents. Oh, I understand you're not eligible yet. And it's only because they are eligible through the form, they haven't brought it to CLBC. And so that's a really important piece. And if you're a parent and that's challenging for you, you can ask, because I actually will take that form, call CLBC with you there, I have permission, and I will actually hand deliver it myself. Or we can go together. So there's options out there.
There's an entire intake process for CLBC.
I have something to add because my son, when he was in high school, there's a process that he has gone through, and then we were told that he's not eligible, and then after a few months he's eligible. So what happened was that we were told that he cannot do the psych ed assessment when he was 15 or 16. That's too early. So he actually did it when he's 17 years old. And then I think the score was a little bit too high, so he has to do the adaptive behavior. So the adaptive behavior is also borderline score. So we actually ended up getting a lot of letter of support from the school, because the school has been giving him a lot of support. But because he has been having therapy for so many years, he appears very well, but he still needs the support. So from the letter from the school, from the clinical psychologist, and also from the behavior consultant that he has. So give it to CLBC. So just before he turned 19 years old, we were told that he's eligible. So that's a special case, that's borderline case.
In our situation, we had autism intervention funding until he was 19. Then we were asked to have it reassessed, and through CLBC, and he again through that through the assessment there, which was a 2-hour assessment. Now, so we've had a psychiatric diagnosis at age 6. We had a psychoed assessment done about 9 or 10. So we had the full report, but we were asked to have the assessment. And like your son, our son presents quite well, and he was denied eligibility. And so when we dropped that, and then we went, we needed a reassessment after a certain period for a disability tax assessment. So we went through Disability Alliance, and they helped put the proper words together to ensure that we got the disability tax credit. And that is important for us, but it's also important because it allows us to apply for the RDSP, which is important for him in the long term. Now, that process of Disability Alliance was really great at finding out the words, because they really emphasized the impact of social skills deficits and coping with anxiety and stress in terms of its ability to ensure overall success. And so that was helpful for us to get the disability tax credit. But I have to say and in talking with I forgot his name right now, Sam Turcott, later, he said, he was very upfront about saying the system that we live in is based on a negative or reductive approach. And so what it does is it wants to show in filling out the application, all of our lives we've spent our time trying to encourage our people to be the best that they can be, and the forms are designed to show what they can't do. So it's very emotionally draining for us to go through as families, to sit there with our now adult, our almost adult son, and talk about what they can't do so well. And so it's a tough process. And so basically, talk to your kids beforehand and tell them this is a form. There are many ways in which life has dealt you an uneven hand. And so this is a step we have to go through in order to get you something that will help even that path out for you in the future. And so suck it up. We have to live through this as a family, and it's gross, but get it over with and do it.
Any more questions? Okay, go ahead.
I don't want to take up any more airspace if there's something. So, Rachel, this is a question for you. So I'm curious if you could shed some light on the process that you and your family, particularly your son, went through when the decision was made for him to move out and start that life away from home.
Sure. So I actually, like I said, I have 2 children who have some challenges. So my youngest, who's 25 now. So there was a 12-year age gap between the 2 of them. And my youngest is diagnosed with learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder. And my older son, Leslie, has a severe seizure disorder, so he's on a very large number of seizure meds, and that he deals with a lot of fatigue. And so for him, by the time 3 o'clock comes, he's done for the day. He wants to hang out, play some video games. You know, we start his, you know, he has lights out by 8:30, and his bed, he needs a lot of help with personal care, so his bedtime routine takes a long time. So, you know, he wants to be home at 3 o'clock. My youngest, who's 12 years younger, she wanted to be out doing stuff. You know, getting home at 8 or 9 every night would have been perfect for her. You know, she wanted an activity after school every day. So there was just this huge conflict between the two of them, and they were really unhappy living together. And then the youngest actually started to run away. We live beside not run away from home, but we live beside a park, and if she could hear kids playing in the park, she would just take off. And she was only 8, she wasn't really old enough to do that, but then I'd have this situation. So it was really like, you know, a health and safety situation for us when we made that decision for Leslie to move out. So it was probably a bit younger than I would have liked. For you know, I wasn't. It was hard. I felt, you know, a lot of grief, a lot of guilt about Leslie being on his own. His initial placement when he moved out was to a group home because it was done as an emergency placement because of Sasha's, the youngest Sasha's problems or, you know, struggles, challenges. So it was done. Leslie moved initially to a group home. So that was, you know, as staffed residence, and which, you know, used to be the most common living situation for people with intellectual disabilities who weren't living with their families. And you know, and across Canada it still is the most common, but in British Columbia there's been a huge shift to home sharing. So he was in the group home for 3 years, and after that 3 years, one of the staff approached us and said that, you know, and I could see that she and Leslie were forming this wonderful connection, and she was interested in doing life sharing with him. And I think when he first moved out, I kind of had a feeling if he couldn't live with our family, I wasn't sure I wanted him living with any family. Like, it just felt really hard for me that, you know, I couldn't look after him anymore, and yet some other family was going to welcome them into his home. So a group home felt easier for me. And then after that time, when I knew the individual he was going to go and live with, I could see her, I could understand how, you know, and I think I had done some healing in that time, sort of, you know. So then he moved into the home share, and it's been really wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, I'd like to. Is Sashi here? She's outside the room. So we have someone. Okay, maybe after the session. Okay. Do we still have a couple minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have any other questions? So if not, then we will close the Facebook Live session first. Thanks everyone for watching on Facebook. If you have other questions, you can always phone us, 604-434-0880 extension 104 to ask to speak to either Stella or Lindy. Thank you. So like there's a